Hey everybody, welcome back to Great Mondays Radio. Today with me I have Paula Allen, who is the SVP and Global Leader of Research at TELUS Health. And because she's head of research, she has access to all these really interesting trends and emerging challenges that are happening in the workplace. And so that's why I asked Paula to come on. There's a lot of great stuff going on and a lot of challenging stuff, and we want to make sure that we understand what's going on in the world so that we can better prepare for that. Paula Allen, thanks for coming on Great Mondays Radio.
My pleasure.
So, Paula, how did you? Let's start with your kind of path here. So, you are now deep into understanding, writing about employee well-being, I guess is the way to put it. How did you get here? Why is that where you decided to spend your precious time?
Oh, so what's my story? Okay, I'll tell you a little bit. I actually started out doing clinical work working with children and had a wonderful experience with that. I mean, we dealt with children with a number of different challenges, but worked very well to make sure that they had the environment, make sure that they had the resources to be the best that they could be, and was very, very happy at doing that. And then, as life happens, there was an opportunity for me to start working with adults. And got to tell you, I was pretty horrified. The same approach, and this was adults in workplaces. So these are people who were connected to a workplace as employees. They went off on disability leave because of one reason or another. And at that time, their whole lives were turned upside down, not just because of the illness, but they were treated very differently. They ended up kind of experiencing their workplace connection in a pretty negative way. And I knew from my background that that was not going to help their recovery. That
Yeah.
was not going to help them return to work and productivity. So, fast forward to today, I had the opportunity at that point to do some work in product development and service development to change things around. And I've spent my entire career kind of going upstream. So what got us to a place where we could be treating other human beings like such and not even realize it was not creating any value?
Mm.
And what needed to happen? So prevention, workplace culture, research right now to help us understand what works, what doesn't work, and to hopefully set organizations on a better path. So it's been a long journey, but a lot of fun.
When you say how we got here, what are some examples of what you saw that you were taken aback by? Some more specific examples of, like you said, how they were treated or what the environment is. Let's get more specific.
Okay. I think one of the things that comes to mind was at that point, and again, this is the case still in some situations.
That's why I'm asking.
When
Yes, unfortunately, yeah.
yeah, when someone went off on leave, they and typically it was if there was any suspicion, because people don't necessarily know, but if there was any suspicion, it was a leave because of a mental health issue. They would be kind of cut off. You'd have this behavior where somebody who'd been working with an organization for 15, 20 years, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, and they had a community because your workplace is a community. And all of a sudden when they get ill, no contact, no updates, no nothing. So
Mm.
think about that. Think about it. And I sat in front of people at that time, and it brought them to tears, brought me to tears, because people were saying, I worked, I had friends, I thought I was valued, and now that I'm sick, nobody cares about me, nobody wants me back, nobody is even thinking about whether I'm alive or dead.
Mm.
So, as human beings, we need to feel a sense of belonging, connection, and inclusion. And if you go back to, what I was telling you about before, which is my experience with children, think about that if you did that to a child. You're having some difficulty right now. Okay, so just go in that room and figure out how to heal yourself. I'm not going to bother you. That's abuse.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that everyone feels a sense of connection.
I can imagine that it's particularly hard now in kind of our modern era where our work is often our primary social community.
Yes.
There is a lot of trend lines pointing towards a collapse of religious interest in religious communities or social communities or neighborhood groups that maybe previously would have sustained us, right?
Mhm.
Going to church and have a different community, but that's not really where we are anymore. And
Without
so
question. Yeah.
that really feels tough. So it's that being cut off from your community that was a big piece of what you saw going in. Is that correct?
Without question, absolutely without question. And you may or may not be aware, but the World Health Organization just came out with a report that this loneliness that we're feeling across
An
the globe.
epidemic of loneliness.
Exactly. And this is not insignificant. And it's not even just about mental health. It impacts your physical health, cardiovascular system, your immune system, because there's so much strain that's put on us as human beings when we're not in a place that we should be. Your life expectancy is less. It's not just for people. We as a society, we often talk about loneliness and isolation, and we think about people who are getting a little bit older and they might have lost a spouse, lost their work connections, etc., and not really have the kind of circle. And that is the case to a certain extent, but that's not your highest risk group. I
Hmm.
think people are realizing that they have to go out and make those connections, after retirement, et cetera. The high risk group is your younger adults, your teenagers. We've developed a society right now where objectively we might not even feel like we need each other. You can do a whole bunch of things. Nobody's coming over to your place to help build their barn. You don't need that,
Yes,
right?
that's
Or
right.
worse, not everybody does. But we are still human and we still need other people. We're kind of wired to have a sense of fear and anxiety when we're by ourselves. Like think about it. Like a
Yeah.
few hundred years ago, if you were by yourself, you would not
You
survive.
wouldn't survive. Right. It is a survival mechanism, right? It's
Yeah,
built into our DNA.
absolutely.
So more specifically, if I'm a leader or a manager and someone in my group has to take some time off,
Mhm.
and maybe you can educate us around, how much time and how does that, right? Obviously, if it's, something they have to be out for weeks, there's gonna be one situation versus, hey, I just need a quote unquote mental health day. What can I'll just start with from there. Can someone, a manager of a group of 12 or, a couple hundred, do something to um, help this person feel less cut off?
Oh, without question, absolutely. And I think what sometimes we do as human beings is we talk ourselves out of what's normal, what's natural, what we know to be good. I've spoken to some managers, and they say, "Well, I don't want to say something wrong, and I don't want to feel like I'm bothering them or forcing them back to work." And that's not the intent. Your intent always is just making somebody else feel valued, making
Mhm.
them feel that they are a part of something. So just reaching out, every a couple of days, a week, just to make sure that if when they cross your mind, and they should cross your mind every once in a while, that you just send them a note, have a little call, maybe even set up some time. It's so powerful. And think about one technique that's interesting as well is workplaces are changing a lot, and they're changing pretty quickly. And if you're thinking about somebody who is off and they don't know what's going on, it's there's a lot of trepidation in returning. Like you're returning to like a whole new environment, or potentially so.
Lots of stress.
A lot of stress. So
Yeah.
just the idea of, in a kind and collaborative way, let me give you some updates in terms of what's going on right now,
Mm,
just so you keep connected to the team. John and his partners had a child. We're moving to a new location and it looks great. We have a new change in policy, but I'm not going to go bother you with that, but we'll talk about that a little bit more, whenever you're ready to. But just investing in that other person,
mm,
so people continue to feel part of something. They don't feel like they have been dropped.
yeah. Okay, so there's two things I'll just repeat back. Just I think I think is interesting. Two different types of communication or content of communication. One is, hey, how are you doing? I'm just checking in. I'm thinking about you.
Mhm.
That's one piece, right? And you're saying what that is whatever you say almost doesn't even matter. It's just reaching out, and that's important, right? And that's something that anybody on the team could do. You might even want to rally some people around that and just say, hey, send this person a text. Hey, I was thinking about you, whatever it might be. The second is because there's when there's a lack of communication, and I know this having come from brand, right? It's like there's rarely an organization that communicates too much, right? It's like the problem is always they don't communicate enough. And so
Yeah.
this is that microcosm. So, hey, I just want to let you know what's going on. And therefore, that there's no that vacuum or void or doubt that that person has, right? Where you're like, oh my God, they're not even thinking about me. Am I going to be fired? Like, what's going on, right? That doesn't help that person. And so I'm going to tell and keep you on the updates just as you are still part of the team. And that in and of itself, like the specific, to your point, the specific policy doesn't matter. It's
Hmm.
that I'm telling you what's going on, and so that you know that I want you to be part of this. And that does all immediately, saying that out loud already feels like it is a little thing that you can do to really keep those folks, even just to keep them, to help them do better in their time off and their recovery.
And it will help them when their recovery. And, the main messages that you have in your mind is that I value this person, I value this relationship.
Mm,
So I want to keep that connection going. And, something that you said as well, you are still part of this team.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So let's move forward then to all of this tumult and redefinition of what's happening in the workplace. What I want to do is use your expertise and inquire. We all have, and I've talked many times on many episodes about all the crazy shit that's happening out there, right? Hybrid and war, and what are we doing? And I think you should come back, and we need to make this thing right. And people are sort of struggling with all that stuff. But more specifically, what are you seeing, those trends, those ups and downs? What are some of the biggest impacts to employee wellness and therefore productivity in this time of turmoil? Because turmoil is not, change is not a really good backdrop for productivity, right? Because you have to deal with the
Yeah.
change itself. Not that you can avoid it, but what are you seeing?
Well, where we are right now, we had a couple of steps to get here. So one of the things that was really helpful in understanding that is, at TELUS, we do a mental health index, so we publish it monthly, and we started to do the development on it and collect benchmarks in 2017. And this is just a representative group of people in the workplace, so all employees, and got a baseline in terms of how people were doing in terms of their mental health and well-being and the impact
Mm-hmm.
on productivity. Well, what we saw is a massive decline in 2020, and you know what happened in 2020,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Like,
not. I don't need the day. I don't need the report to know
you,
that.
you,
But
you
yeah,
don't need to, you don't need the words. We just know what happened.
yep.
So the massive decline, which actually was a little bit more than what we expected, but we did expect a decline with all the upheaval, and we still are pretty far from where we were before. we really, when you think about it, there's a change, there was risk, there was, polarization, there was a whole bunch of things that the human mind doesn't like, the increase in isolation in many cases. So we had that as kind of a bit of a collective trauma. And as you know about trauma, when the stimulus leaves, the impact doesn't necessarily leave at the
That's
same time.
correct. That's right. We store that.
Store that. So this is where we are right now. And what's quite clear is that we are more sensitive to stress. We're a little bit more cynical. There's a little bit more conflict.
Mm.
Everything is has put us a little bit more on edge. So, we see this in an egregious fashion for a few people, but for most, it's just enough to make everything a little bit more difficult. And quite frankly, even the behavior that you have more difficult for somebody else. And ask anybody who's frontline service in an airplane or
That's
a
right.
coffee shop what the population is like. So we have this sort of backdrop of sensitivity to stress, which is
Mm.
point number one. And then after the 2020 incident, like all of that, we didn't have a stress holiday. Like we sort of went
Nope.
into high inflation. We went into layoffs. We went into battles between employees and employees about where people should work. So
Mm.
a whole bunch of additional upheavals again on this backdrop of
Mm.
sensitivity to stress.
Hmm.
So this is really what's on the mind of the organizations that we deal with is how do we actually take a beat? Like how do we make sure that we're equipping our leaders so they're not making things worse, that they can help make things better?
Yeah.
How do we support our employees in a way that is meaningful and not the newest shiny tool that people don't care about after 3 days?
Yeah.
So this is really an issue of importance. And the other reason why it's an issue of importance, so we have the sensitivity of stress, we have all the change that we're having right now. If you talk to any business leader, what they perceive as being important things over the next few years,
Hmm.
they're going to say workplace upheaval as a result of AI. They're going to see more competitors as a result of different niches coming up, but also different uses of technology, faster change and a faster pace of change in the workplace. So all of this stuff, if you don't prepare, if you don't sort of, have a good starting place that kind of is well beyond where we are right now, which is this high sensitivity to stress, how do you think you're going to do? You're not going to do all that well. You're going to spend all your time dealing with employee relations issues as opposed to everybody getting down to business and reaping the rewards, employee and employer, of success.
Mm. Okay, so the first thing that we have to realize is we are all still suffering from the collective trauma. We're carrying it with us. I appreciate you calling out this. I do agree that there's a lot of cynicism.
Yeah.
I teach business students, and they're pretty cynical about business and work, and I would think that they were sort of the most hopeful cohort. Um, we didn't get a reprieve. So we're still on it. And then we're looking in the face of massive, even more upheaval. So we have to
Right.
understand that that's what's facing us and our employees. And you are 100% spot on that it really resonated for me when you said you're going to deal with all these employee problems, not actually doing the work.
Yeah.
So when we're, and I've, we have a lot of HR leaders on this podcast, and I feel like that's the message that they're sending. And now we have the context for that, right? It's like there's just so much back and forth, and it feels like it's requisite. It feels like it is a necessity. But what I think you're saying is, if we're able to see it and prepare for it, and maybe I'll ask you to give us a few tips and pointers as how to do it. It it doesn't have to be a requirement that you're having all of this conflict and dealing with the humans that is now kind of the standard day-to-day operations post 2020.
That's right. And I think the way to do it, number one, the first thing is don't put your head in the sand. Like there are so many people who would just rather say, oh, I don't want to deal with it. It'll just get better on its own. And, it just doesn't work that
You
way. Like,
can't put your head in the sand.
blind optimism just means you're going to be disappointed. It's
Yeah.
one predictor
Yeah.
of defeat, but it's not that scary when you put your heads around it and you understand what is going on, because that gives you the power to make decisions around how to mitigate. So I do think it's important that sort of or organizations be intentional around what needs to happen in this employee employer relationship. And we sort of put it in two big buckets. One is that people need support as human beings. I mean, we need, dental care, we need physical health support. We definitely need to have good quality supports when it comes to our mental health as well. We need to up the game in terms of what we consider good quality, how we communicate, how we destigmatize people getting the support that they need as individuals, so their health base is the best that it possibly can be. And
Is that in the benefits before you go to the second point? Is that in would you call those like the kind of the benefit bucket of, you're saying health and dental and vision and
yeah,
mental health? Is that's really what we're talking about? Hey, you need to be able to, in order for people to do their work, show up, they have to be taken care of at a very almost basic level.
yeah, for sure. And in the benefits, but also like things like EAP, so workplace programs. And one of the things is communicating them. Like if you have all these great benefits, nobody knows about it. We did a bit of research, and we
Yep.
only found that it was about 36% of employees know about EAP and what it offers.
Can you
And you
define
have to.
EAP for me, for our
Oh, of
audience?
course.
Sorry.
There you go. I just sort of went into jargon, so I should put the penny in the jar. Employee assistance program.
Employee assistance programs. All right, please continue.
So
So only 36% was the number?
yeah, what it's counseling support. It's 24/7 access to confidential counseling, voluntary. You don't have to pay out of pocket. There
Hmm.
isn't any pre requirements. It really is a foundation in terms of health and mental health, and you'll get that service. You'll get qualified counselors. You'll be able to be navigated to other services if you have other needs as well. And there's work life services, the things that help you just with the stresses of life, like financial consultation, legal consultation. It's pretty amazing, actually. And it is completely free to the employees because employers fund it.
Yeah.
But what employers don't often do is to communicate. They believe that, because they told about it when and somebody started working, that
Onboarding.
people
Yeah,
remember. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
No, I have I have a few friends that make a full-time living just doing benefits communications, and they're geniuses at it, and it's such an incredible niche because it's connecting the resources that your company's investing to the actual benefits. If you don't have that communication, it doesn't work. So that is, I appreciate that you really called it out. All right. So we got that support. We need to communicate it. Was that point one? And then,
That was point one.
okay. All right.
Point one. So that is one big bucket. The other big bucket is your environment. So we
Hmm.
know just generally, there's your environment impacts your health without question. There's social determinants of health. There's your experiences in life. The workplace experience is a massive part of your life. Like this whole thing about work life separation, it doesn't even exist, right? So how do you separate it? You become one person at work and one person when you're not. No, you're one human being. And the time that you spend with your work colleagues, in your work environment, in your workplace is a part of your life. So, what's happened is, and I think it's a good thing, employers are starting to see those two parts, because a lot of the conversations that we have is how do we make sure that people get the services that they want, but how do we shape a culture and environment that is mentally healthy?
Mm.
Like, how do we make sure that we're not just pouring money here in a way that more than we need to because we're creating a problem over here?
But does it matter as much anymore? We're not spending as much time in the office.
Yeah, but it's not geocentric, right? You still have relationships. You
Yes.
still need that sense of inclusion. You
Okay.
still need to feel you can still have, at one end of the spectrum, bullying and harassment. All of those things matter, whether I'm relating to you because you're sitting across the desk from me, or I'm relating to you in a video
Uh,
conference where we
so
are
when
right
you say, so when you, I apologize. So, when you say environment, you
now.
don't just mean physical environment,
Psychological environment, you know
psychological environment.
and the psychological safety. And we talked in the very beginning about productivity, and I would recommend that every single one of your readers do some background research on psychological safety. Just understand what that actually is and
Yeah.
understand the impact on your business,
Yeah.
because it's not just, well, I have a wonderful policy around anti-bullying and harassment. That's not it. It's when people feel that they can speak, that they can contribute to the workplace in a way that, if something is happening, and they see something wrong, that they can say something, that they don't feel that they're in necessarily a box.
Yeah.
That safety, like, think about it in other situations. If you had a friend and you weren't able to kind of speak your mind, you were always second guessing your words, that friendship would dissolve pretty quickly because it was creating too much anxiety for you.
Yeah.
We've had experiments where we looked at high performing work teams, and the difference between the uber high performer and the one that just had a whole bunch of smart people who did mediocre work was that the uber high performers were the ones where the team felt a sense of inclusion and psychological safety. The correlation between mental health and well being and productivity, both of
Mm.
those correlations are extremely strong.
So, there is so much out there about how to create psychological safety in our environment, both our physical and psychological environment. So it would be a huge task to ask you to kind of tell us how to do it. Do you have a few takeaways, either point us in the
Mhm.
right direction or a few tips that like I would say probably most of the folks listening to this are familiar with psychological safety as a concept. So we don't have to be shy about digging too far into it. What How do you, in a hybrid environment, create, like, what are the sort of the prereqs for creating psychological safety, or how do you start to create that for a team?
Yeah. So I think when you think about your biggest levers, right? The things that'll make the biggest difference. Um, Regardless of what you have in terms of your overall vision as an organization, you have to get your managers aligned. You have to make sure that they're aware. You have to make sure that they're trained, because not everybody, will create that kind of healthy environment automatically. Even very nice people. It's not just about
It's
being
not,
nice.
it's That's right. Thank you for saying that. It's not just about being nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and we did some research. We globally, like we had 16,000 individuals, and we found some themes around the behaviors that managers have. Kind of repeated behavior that essentially, become traits that make a difference between teams that were in a good place and teams that weren't, and they all overlap psychological safety, but they were very specific. One was being inclusive. And that we were talking about it before when somebody is off on disability leave, but you can be inclusive or not inclusive when people are at work as well. You can always go to certain people. You can always you can make decisions and not include other people. People need to make sure need to feel that their voice is valued and that their
Mm,
thoughts are valued. That's one thing. The other thing that we found is that when people were team focused, when managers were team focused as opposed to individual focused, that made a big difference as well. And the individual focus could show itself in a couple of ways. One would be that they're really focused on their own success and their own glory and not necessarily that of the team. The
mm-hmm,
other is that they are encouraging their employees to think about their own success and their own metrics and not facilitate collaboration, almost setting up competition between people
mm,
as opposed to collaboration. So that team focused was part of that psychological safety as well. Not surprisingly, just being kind, as opposed to being hostile and having this sort of tough love kind of a way. Like we even know clinically that tough love doesn't work. It ends up breaking people. People need to feel that they are connected to you. But there were two other things that came up as surprises as well. One was a manager with passion and charisma and actually believed in the purpose of
mm,
what they were doing.
mm,
When you have that and you exude that, it's helpful. We as human beings, another thing that we need other than other people is a sense of purpose, that what you're doing is
mm-hmm,
valuable, that you are excited about it, that you're willing to stretch in order to do better. So, not keeping in a rut. We're not built like that. If we were, we would still be at a stage where we're just discovering fire instead of
mm,
discovering AI. Like we're built
yeah.
to sort of have that passion to move forward. And the last one was a leader who was willing to make decisions. So
Wait, isn't that the leader's job?
yeah, but there is a fair bit of dithering sometimes. There is delayed decision making. There is fearful approaches where you have to go through 3, 4, 5 levels in order to make a decision. So that leaves
Yeah.
employees in limbo. They're not feeling that they're able to move forward. It adds a sense of just malaise, to tell you the truth, but also lack of confidence.
Mm,
So those five things really made a difference. So, some of the ones I mentioned before are foundational to psychological safety, but
yeah.
even when you just put that in managers' minds and train them on some of the behaviors that might inadvertently, support or not support that, you're going to develop a pattern of behavior that's going to be very helpful to your employees.
No, I love this. All right, I'm going to repeat it. So I wrote it
Mhm.
down. So inclusive in that you are enabling everybody on the team to have a voice in some capacity.
Yes.
A team focus, not an individual focus. How are we going to get better? Not how am I going to get better?
Mhm.
um, Being kind. So it doesn't work the tough love doesn't work. So how can you be kind in your engagement with your employees, and even kind with your criticism, right?
Yes.
um a manager that has passion and belief in the purpose, and I was so pleased to hear you say that. Purpose is something that I yell about all the time. Kindly, I yell about it. And then finally, a leader who makes decisions. Oh my gosh, if wow. Yeah, I think that's right. It's calling it out like that, a leader who needs to make decisions. It does feel like there is almost an epidemic of fear in
Mhm.
in corporate America, and I would say North America, of these leaders making, not able to make decisions for further make the wrong decision. And
Yeah.
that, what you're telling me, is a psychological safety killer. If you're not able to make decisions, it's not, your team is just not, it's a way of deflating the team's performance. Is
It
that
deflates you. It keeps people in limbo. Create anxiety stories. It's not good. And but these things reinforce each other as well. You
Yeah.
know, if you are kind, which means it doesn't mean that you hide things or you're coddling, you know, but you're really respectful in terms of how you
Mm,
deal with people, then you're going to it's going to be easier for people to participate, which is the other side of you being inclusive. If you are inclusive, you're going to get honest things from your staff. You're going to get the real deal. You're going to get the information. You're going
mhm.
to be able to make better decisions. If people feel that they can contribute and that it will result in actually decisions, guess what? They're going to get fired up. Like you're going to feel that sense of purpose and the ability to move forward, and so will your team. So, you know, these things, they help each other. It's not like I'm going to pick one and do that. You know, you really have to think about how you can take steps in all.
Amazing. I learned a ton today. Paula Allen, SVP, Global Leader of Research at TELUS Health. If you want to learn more, telushealth.com, TELUSHEALTH. Paula, thank you so much for coming on Great Mondays Radio. It was so informative. We really did a big tour of workplace wellness, how to get people back and feeling part of the team, and then what it takes to create psychological safety. Amazing. Thank you for lending some of your precious time with us.
It was absolutely my pleasure.
Thank you.